Good afternoon. We're waiting for everybody to get in, but while we do that, I just want to thank everybody for being here. We're going to give it one more minute, and then we will get started. All right. Welcome to our virtual Lunch Connect presented by Cedar Park Regional Medical Center. I want to welcome you to our webinar. We are excited to get this going, and I will begin. My name is Tony Molina. I'm President and CEO of the Cedar Park Chamber of Commerce. I want to remind everybody that we have this set up as a webinar, but are recording this should you get kicked out. So we'll be able to send that to everybody. I want to send a quick thank you to our presenting sponsor for our Lunch Connect series, Cedar Park Regional Medical Center. And now I'm excited to introduce our Williamson County Treasurer, Scott Heselmeyer. Scott Heselmeyer was sworn in as the Williamson County Treasurer on March 1st, 2017. A sixth-generation Williamson County resident, Mr. Heselmeyer is a graduate of Thrall High School, Texas A&M University, and Georgetown University Law Center. Prior to being appointed Treasurer, Mr. Heselmeyer practiced law in Round Rock for 13 years. He currently serves on the Board of Directors of the Williamson County Livestock Association and the Chasco Family YMCA. He has previously served as General Counsel for the Round Rock Chamber of Commerce, on the boards of the Hutto Economic Development Corporation and Habitat for Humanity of Williamson County, and was a member of the Board of Trustees for First United Methodist Church of Round Rock. He and his wife Amanda have 2 children and are members of Hill Country Bible Church in Georgetown. Please join me in a virtual welcome of Mr. Scott Heselmeyer.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate everybody being here. Thank you for the opportunity. Glad to have the opportunity to talk to everybody about what we've been doing here in Williamson County. Look forward to being able to do that in person here at some point in the future. Tony, you froze up on me. Are y'all still there with me? Okay, good. You're good now. Okay. I just want to make sure it wasn't on my end. I live out here in Gerald, and sometimes our internet isn't the best, but we're going to do the best we can today. I have a kind of brief presentation. Tony asked me to give an update on the WILCO Forward program here in Williamson County. So I'm gonna do that, and we'll get started with that presentation. And then I think Tony mentioned there'll be a little time for Q&A at the end. Okay, Tony, give me a acknowledgement. Is that up on screen? Good. Okay, good. Well, guys, let's talk a little bit about WILCO Forward and how we've spent our CARES Act money here in Williamson County and how we plan to go about that. I want to start by giving you a little background of what's happened with COVID-19 here in Williamson County. As we sit in the first week in July, I think it seems like we've been dealing with this for about 3 years. And it's actually been now just on 4 months that we've been working through this situation. So real quickly, to take us kind of back in time a little bit, Williamson County issued our disaster declaration on March 4th. We had our first 4 confirmed cases of COVID-19 on the 18th. On that same day, I attended the first meeting of a small business task force that was formed to help address the needs of small business, of all business, but particularly small business here in Williamson County, as we moved into what we knew was going to be a challenging situation. One thing I want to mention, when I went into that first meeting on March 18th, one of the first people in the room with me was Tony Molina, and Tony and the Cedar Park Chamber have been an integral part of all of our work and our planning on the small business side as we've been going through this. When we had that first meeting, we kind of knew what was coming. March 24th, about a week later, we issued the stay home, stay safe order. And we knew, unfortunately, when that was coming around, that was going to be devastating on our small businesses. So that's why we were working in that task force at that time. First week of April, some of our local cities and chambers, including Cedar Park, started launching some small business grant programs. Those were the early examples that we used on a countywide basis to start the WILCO Forward program. Later that week, we expanded that task force to include local small business leaders from around the county. We started meeting virtually and talking a few times a week, on how we were going to handle getting business started back up, and B, what we could do to try to support our small businesses in the county. What was coming down the pipe at that time that we didn't know a whole lot about yet was the CARES Act funding. Now, the CARES Act is the federal legislation that brought you the paycheck protection loans, that brought about the stimulus payments that came around, and it also sent money to state and local governments. There was a large payment made to the state of Texas, and then all county and city governments with a population of 500,000 people or more actually received direct funding. Here in Williamson County, we received $93 million and change, and that money was received on April 22nd. And when we received that, there wasn't a whole lot of guidance, but we worked quickly with the federal government and some of our representatives to figure out what we could do with that money. And because we already had that task force together, we were able to start working right away on our first priority, which was supporting our small businesses. So less than 2 weeks later, on May 5th, we launched the WILCO Forward program, which is a multi-step allocation of our CARES Act funding. We started that first with phase 1, which was our small business grant program, initially budgeted at $25 million, and later, as I'll explain, expanded to $35. So let's talk a little bit about WILCO Forward. Phase 1 was our small business grants. Again, we received funding on April 22nd. On May 5th, the Commissioner's Court authorized the WILCO Forward Small Business Grant Program. And we were ready to go live in less than 2 days on May 7th. We went live with that program at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Most of you've probably seen and hopefully participated in our application. We got 500 applications in the first 30 minutes, 1,700 within the first 12 hours, and 2,600 within the first week. I think that really underscores what the need in the small business community was at the time. Our auditor's office began working on those applications immediately. And again, within 24 hours the next day, we issued our first $1.1 million in grant checks on the first day. We weren't really sure exactly what the need was going to be. We were pretty sure from the beginning that 25 million wasn't quite going to cut it. By the end of May, it became clear that we would need a little more. And so without hesitation, on June 1st, Commissioner's Court expanded that budget to 35 million, which was about 37% of all of the CARES Act funds that we received. I want to give you all an update of where we stand. The program ended here last week on June 30th. So in just under 2 months, we had 4,194 applications submitted. We approved 3,622 of those. 459 applications were denied. Most of those were duplicates. Especially in the early days of the program, we received so many so quickly that it took us a couple of weeks to get through a backlog. And some people, understandably, were concerned that their applications may not have been considered and submitted again. And as of this last Saturday, there were 113 applications still pending. Those were all just applications that we were waiting on some backup information for before we approved them. So as I said, we've approved 4,194 applications, and we have actually approved and sent out $33,957,017.92, an average grant of $9,375.21. Back at the beginning of this program when we started it, I think I estimated in my mind that we were going to have about 3,000 applications and an average grant of about $10 million. I was pretty close, but we actually ended up a little over 4,000. And our budget is $35 million, and when we get those other 100 and some odd applications processed, I think we're going to bump right up to it. But I think we're proud of the fact that in less than 2 months' time, we've put out an average grant of about $9,300 to what'll be over 4,200 businesses here in Williamson County. I think the biggest question on a lot of people's minds at this point, I think we did a really good job of publicizing the WILCO Forward program, of letting businesses know it was out there, obviously from the volume of applications that we got. And I think now everybody's turning to, okay, what comes next? And these were grants, they weren't loans, but we are going to have to require, because of requirements in the CARES Act, that businesses report back to the county to make sure that the grant funds are spent in a way that was eligible under the program. And so in that application, there was a list, which is included here, of eligible expenses. Those need to be incurred by the business by September 30th, and they need to match at least the amount of grant. That's things like payroll, contract labor, supplier payments, renter mortgage payments, renter lease on equipment, new or expanded technologies, utilities, raw materials, marketing, those kind of critical business operations. If your business needed PPE or sanitation supplies, and also interest on debt obligations that were incurred before February 1st. So as you can see, if you filled out an application, you know that our things that we considered for the grant amount were pretty narrow, but the things that the money can actually be spent on are pretty broad. We want to make sure that as long as a business is up and operating appropriately, that they find categories that they can spend this grant fund on appropriately. That information is going to need to be submitted to the Williamson County Auditor. The email there is smallbusinessapp@wilco.org. If you received a grant, you should have received some information on that. It's also on the WILCO Forward website. That information just needs to be submitted by the end of October. So once we get that done, that's going to wrap up the WILCO Forward Small Business Grant Program. As I stated in the beginning, that was our first priority. We wanted to keep as many small businesses as we could on their feet through the first extremely challenging part of this pandemic. As we're seeing right now, we have more challenges and we have more to come. So hopefully through this program, we've allowed a good chunk of our businesses to be prepared for some of those challenges. I'm happy to take some questions on it. Before I do that, let me kind of walk through where we go from here with our CARES Act money and with the WILCO Forward program. On June 1st, we also implemented phase 2. As a direct recipient, as a county that received money directly from the federal government, we were in charge of taking care of our own cities. The cities within Williamson County did not receive money from the state. They had to look to us to receive it. So we allocated $30 million for what we're calling phase 2. $20 million of that was for our cities, $1 million of that for our health district, $500,000 for our emergency services district, $500,000 for Bluebonnet Trails, about $5 million for additional county expenses that we have incurred on a county level. And then we have a reserve fund built in there of about $3 million. As you can probably guess right now, there's a lot of additional expenses from the health district, some of our cities, et cetera. So if we bump up against some of those numbers, we have a reserve fund there to do it. The cities are applying to the county for reimbursement after they have made eligible expenses. The first round of those applications has already occurred in June, and those checks will be written here within the next week or so. And then we will have submissions again in September and December for that phase 2. We also came in then and did a phase 2B, which is a partnership with the YMCA. We've allocated $750,000 for that, for the YMCA to help with childcare for unemployed and the underemployed, for some sanitation needs and some PPE needs there with our partnership with the YMCA, who has been a partner with the county since the beginning of this situation and helping us out with things like childcare. What we're working on now is phase 3, which is our community assistance program. Here in a couple of weeks, the additional unemployment benefit from the federal government is set to expire. We expect when that happens, there will become an increasing need in the community for things like rent and utility assistance. We as a county government know that we are not set up to manage a rent utility assistance program on our own. So we're currently working to partner with some local community organizations to set up that program. We've allocated $5 million for that, a little over $4 million from our direct CARES Act money, and then we actually have $933,000 from the Community Development Block Grant funding that's available for that specific purpose. So together, those will total about $5 million. So where we stand right now, just kind of in summary on this, is we have $93 million, as I mentioned, in CARES Act funding, plus the $933,000 in CDBG funds. We allocated, and as you can tell, our very first most important priority was trying to give assistance to our small businesses. There was $35 million that was allocated and has been, for the most part, sent out through that program. Internally, the county has allocated about $11.5 million. Excuse me. In that, in the early days, we were really working logistics for everyone, the cities, especially our smaller cities, our ESDs, et cetera. So a lot of technology expenses, sanitation and PPE expenses for the whole county in that. As I mentioned, $20 million for the cities, money for the health district, ESDs, for mental health, YMCA, and our community assistance. So at this point, we've actually allocated $77.3 million of our CARES Act funds, and we have about $17 million left that is not allocated. We actually have a lot more than that left because we haven't spent a lot of this money that's been allocated up above. It's ready and in those buckets. Amongst that $17 million, we still have things to consider, such as helping out our school districts. One of the things on that is waiting to see exactly how things shake out with the Texas Education Agency and the state. There was money allocated directly to school districts from the CARES Act, but the state is managing that money. So we're waiting to see how that's going to pan out. Also, as you know, cases, hospitalizations, et cetera, are way up right now. And so we have some money in reserve to see what the need becomes. The CARES Act money is designed for expenses that are incurred through the end of 2020. So we're leaving some of that money set aside for unknown expenses that may come about between now and then. So I went through that a little bit quickly, but that's the presentation I have. I wanted to kind of leave some time if there's questions, Tony. But that's kind of a real basic rundown of what we've done with our federal assistance here in Williamson County.
Thank you, Scott. The great presentation, a lot of good information there. If you do have a question for Scott, please use the Q&A portion towards the bottom of your screen. We do have a couple already. Our first one is, what percentage of grants went to Cedar Park businesses? Do you have that breakdown?
If you'll give me just a minute, I'll look at what it was a couple of weeks ago. I ran that number about a month ago, and I'm going to guess that it hasn't changed significantly from what we had then. So give me just a moment here, and we will find that number.
No problem.
Okay, so at the time that I ran this, which was on June 16th, we had, on June 16th, we had approved about 30 million. So we were close to where we were at that time. And 6 million of that had gone to Cedar Park businesses. And I'll clarify what that means here in a minute. So that was about 20% had gone to Cedar Park businesses. Now, the caveat that I'll give in that is the metric we have to use is where we send the check. And so those were checks that were sent to Cedar Park addresses. Most of those obviously are going to be business addresses in Cedar Park, but there's a chance that somebody was running a business elsewhere in the county and and they had a mailbox or office location in Cedar Park. But I think 20% is a pretty accurate number to use.
Very good, very good. We have another one here. What is the chance for another tranche of federal funds when the original CARES Act funds run out?
I think there's some discussion of that right now. What the actual chances are, I suppose maybe your guess is as good as mine. I did read yesterday there's some serious discussion about additional direct stimulus payments, the checks that went out to individuals. I, at this point, have not heard serious discussion of additional funding being sent to state or local governments. Not to say that might not happen, depending on what happens with the entire situation over the next couple of months. What I might anticipate might happen is there might be an extension of our time to spend that money. Right now, we're to spend it by the end of the year, and obviously, this pandemic is not going away anytime soon. So I think there may be at least an extension. But right now, I haven't heard any serious discussion of additional funds to state and local governments.
This kind of leads into that same thing. Do you believe there is a need for some of the CARES funding to be reallocated for a second wave preparation type thing?
Well, and that's where we have left 17 million that's unallocated currently. And I'm not in any hurry to allocate that 17 million. What we have done is we have planned for what's going on right now. What we have allocated to the cities and the emergency services districts and the health district is more than enough to get them through quite a while, even with what we have going on right now with the caseload. And so, you know, to use, for lack of a better term, we're keeping our powder dry with the 17 million that we have left. So there's a lot of discussion on what we might do with that, but I would not anticipate we make any allocations on that until probably September, October.
What happens if all the grant monies received by a business are not spent?
So if they're not spent, then there would be a request to send the difference back. My hope is we've been very broad in the categories for allowable expenditures, with the idea of we want to make sure that businesses can get that money spent. We don't want any of it back. So hopefully they can find categories in there to get that.
Yeah, I think Scott also means to say that you can always send that to the Chamber of Commerce as well. But that's
you can pay chamber dues. I think that might be an allowable expense.
Is there any particular percentage applied to approved uses? Do you have to apply a certain amount to anything more than anything else?
No, not at all. So for example, if your payroll covers the entire amount, which, you know, one of the calculations was 1 month worth of payroll. So if a business used the payroll calculation, then between now and September 30th, they should have no problem spending all of the grant funds just on payroll. And that's perfectly allowed.
How are you tracking business closings due to COVID-19 versus normal course of business?
That's not something we're tracking currently on the county level. I don't know. It'd be very challenging to accurately track that information. You know, local chambers might have a little better grasp based on, you know, renewals, things like that. But it's not something we really have the ability, unfortunately, to track.
This is the last question. I got another one here. Okay, so we got a couple more. What action do you think the county will take as far as additional emergency orders?
I think there's going to be a significant amount of hesitation in Williamson County to add any additional emergency orders. I not only talking to county officials, but I talk to several of the mayors regularly, city management, those kind of thing. We've been down that road, and I think unfortunately it was necessary to ready our healthcare system for what might be coming. Our healthcare system is significantly strained right now, but it is meeting the challenge. So I think that reasonable things that have been done, the local orders on masks and such, will help. But as I said, this thing's not just going away. But I think there will be great hesitation before any kind of additional restrictive orders come from county or local officials here in Williamson County.
This is kind of a different question than tracking business closures, but how are you, or are you tracking the different types of businesses or industries that applied for grants?
We're attempting to do that. That was a question in our application, but it wasn't a multiple choice question. People could just fill in the blank on what their industry was. So actually tracking that's going to be a bit of a challenge. What I'll say is we do have a significant amount of data, obviously, that was received from over 4,000 applications coming in. We will be processing that data, looking at how many employees we think we may have assisted, industries, areas of the county, size of business, et cetera. Right now, I think understandably our auditors, after processing all these applications, are kind of taking a deep breath. But we will circle back around and try to analyze some of those factors as much as we can. Getting accurate numbers on industry is going to be a bit of a challenge, but I think we'll at least have some estimates.
And we're just going to do one more question, try to be mindful of everybody's time since it's almost 12:30. And this may not be a question that you're able to answer, but how is the pandemic affecting Williamson County income?
Right now, on the county level, it's extremely difficult to tell. The cities I know are going through their budget process right now, and they're concerned about sales tax, which is a significant part of city budgets. To date, I think what we've seen in reports is that sales taxes have not been affected real significantly, but I think that's certainly coming. Sales tax does not come to the county. Our income is nearly entirely from property tax. What is really unknown at this point is what are the challenges we're going to see when we come to the end of the year and the first of next year and people have a tax bill sitting on their desk. I think anybody would anticipate that the payment rate is going to be lower than it's been. So what we're planning on doing basically is just not increasing budgets. There was a discussion in court last week. There's not going to be any cost of living or merit increases for county employees. There will be perhaps a small cost of living to adjust for increases in insurance in medical costs. We don't want employees taking home less money than they took last year. And we're being very tight on any kind of increases in departmental budgets. But right now it's we're being cautious because we don't know what the effect on incomes will be.
Very good. We did have one other question that popped up that I do, even though I said we only had one question left, I do think this is relevant. And I believe I know the answer, so Scott, correct me. The deadline for spending the funds is the end of September, correct?
That is correct, September 30th.
Yeah. So be sure to spend it by then and send in your reporting by that time as well. So that's right, Scott?
Reporting by the end of October.
Okay, you've got 30 days.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
30 days after that.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Scott, for a great presentation. Thank you for that PowerPoint and answering some questions there at the end. We truly appreciate it. Like I said, this is going to be available online, and we'll make sure that link gets sent out to everybody. So with that, I've only got a few announcements real quick, and then we'll call it a day. Our 20th annual Chamber Golf Classic presented by Toyota of Cedar Park will be Monday, August 31st. Thank you again to Cedar Park Regional Medical Center for sponsoring today's event. And we'll have some more details to come for our next Chamber Lunch Connect on August 12th, where we will hopefully be celebrating our Leadership Cedar Park class graduations. So with that, thank you to everybody, and we hope you have a great day. Scott, thank you again.
Thank you, Tony.